Following ongoing talks at Sandringham yesterday evening, the Queen announced that she was supportive of Harry and Meghan's decision to step down as senior royals, despite admitting she would rather see them remain as full-time working members of the royal family.
Well, the statement also confirms the royal couple no longer want to be reliant on public funds and allows for a period of transition where Meghan and Harry will spend time in both Canada and the UK.
But with many questions still left unanswered, we're joined now by our Royal Editor Camilla Tominey. Welcome back to you. So, the statement that you just read out there, you said it's kind of uncharacteristically emotive, actually, from the Queen.
I think certainly. I mean, HM isn't someone who wears her heart on her sleeve much, and she isn't particularly emotional. And yet, at the same time, you read this 153-word statement, and the word family appears in it 9 times.
I'll read the full statement, because you see highlights, but maybe not the whole. You haven't seen the whole thing. Today, my family had very constructive discussions on the future of my grandson and his family. My family and I are entirely supportive of Harry and Meghan's desire to create a new life as a young family. Although we would have preferred them to remain full-time working members of the royal family, we respect and understand their wish to live a more independent life as a family while remaining a valued part of my family. Harry and Meghan have made clear that they do not want to be reliant on public funds in their own lives. It has therefore been agreed that there will be a period of transition in which the Sussexes will spend time in Canada and the UK. These are complex matters for my family to resolve, and there is some more work to be done, but I have asked for final decisions to be reached in the coming days.
I mean, the honesty of it, and also the idea that she's speaking there more as a grandmother than as head of state. And I think that's what this summit was about. It wasn't just about drawing together a blueprint for how the Duke and Duchess of Sussex might move forward in their lives. But equally, I think it was an occasion where the Queen wanted to officiate over some kind of reconciliation, not least between the royal brothers, who hadn't really spoken since they were together at the Remembrance commemorations in November. Obviously, we've seen all of the coverage of how frosty the relationship has become, very sadly and regrettably. And you can tell the sense of devastation in that statement from the Queen, I think. You read that and you think this is a woman who at 93 is so sad that things have come to pass as they have. And her saying quite openly, I would have preferred them to have remained full-time members of the royal family, basically says that what they've decided to do, while she supports it and she understands it, I think deep down she didn't want it to happen.
No, but she understands that family is at the heart of all of this, her preferences and theirs. I guess now we sort of have to look forward to how things are going to change. Obviously, we don't really know yet what's going to happen. I mean, people are saying that they're going to spend a lot of time in Canada. That's making questions being asked over there of how things are going to be financed, because there's this £1.7 million cost of their security. Will they pick that up? Is that a Canadian bill now?
Well, Justin Trudeau over in Canada has said that they would be willing to shoulder some of the financial burden for security, although how that will go down with Canadians...
Well, I mean, I was reading this morning that there are some Canadians who are outraged and threatened to riot.
Well, there's a lot more of a Republican movement in Canada than there is in, say, this country or even somewhere like Australia, so that's problematic. So I think what was discussed yesterday was their accommodation at Frogmore Cottage in Windsor and what might happen to that. If they do want to maintain a UK base, there could be some leasing arrangement whereby they pay for it over the course of the year so that the public think that they've got their money back for the 2.4 million refurb. Also, this idea of how they do get their funding. So at the moment, they've said they're going to lose the sovereign grant funding, which is directly from the government to fund the royals, but that they will keep their Duchy of Cornwall funding, which is from their father. But at the same time, the perception of that isn't exactly that it is just Prince Charles's personal money, because it's derived from land in the British Isles, so that could be complicated. People have read into the fact that she's referred to them as the Sussexes and Harry and Meghan as some sign that they might be stripped of their royal titles. I think that's highly unlikely. At the end of the day, Prince Harry was born an HRH. It could be an arrangement that they come to that they don't use the HRH while they're in North America, because, frankly, it doesn't mean much to Americans. They will always be the Duke and Duchess of Sussex because that was a wedding gift title from the Queen. And equally, if you remember, when Edward VIII abdicated, he was still known as the Duke of Windsor. But all of this needs to be thrashed out. And what's interesting as well is the immediacy with which the Queen wants this settled. She says in that statement, it is very complicated, but we want final decisions to be made in days, not weeks.
You can understand many people obviously saying that we shouldn't be paying for it now. You can't be half in and half out. But the duchy money is commercial, isn't it? So that's not as if it's coming from a public purse. I mean, yes, it's UK land.
Yes.
But nevertheless, it's a commercial enterprise.
And equally, the Queen has a duchy, the Duchy of Lancaster, which similarly provides the funding for her to support her royal life. People are in favour of that, I think, largely because they see the royals giving back. And if you look at somebody like the Prince of Wales, although he's been the longest-serving heir apparent in history, he's used his time really valuably. He's the most hard-working royal. He does the most engagements. And equally, of course, all of his charitable endeavours are hugely lauded. I think there's this sense that if you're going to split your time between the UK and America and go off and do your own commercial things, and let's not forget that Disney footage of Prince Harry basically touting Meghan
as a voiceover
to the head of Disney, at the Lion King premiere, people aren't going to be comfortable with the idea of monies derived from duchy land going towards a couple who aren't even really in the UK much. That's where the dilemma lies.
Let's talk a little bit about the other statement that was released yesterday, because the Times had quoted a source saying Harry and Meghan felt that they'd been pushed out and constantly bullied by William. That is a very strong word to use, and their statement that they released on their behalf, despite clear denials, a false story ran in a UK newspaper today speculating about the relationship between the Duke of Sussex and the Duke of Cambridge. For brothers who care so deeply about the issues surrounding mental health, the use of inflammatory language in this way is offensive and potentially harmful.
Yeah, I think they were completely objecting to the word bullying, not least because Prince William has had a whole cyberbullying campaign. We know what they've done together on Heads Together. In a way, that's the irony. Yesterday was about getting their heads together finally because they hadn't spoken to each other properly in months. But equally, I think there was this sense that they wanted to kind of sound a note of reconciliation ahead of that 90-minute crunch meeting, because there has been so much coverage from people who know them, from Tom Bradbury, the ITV news anchor, saying, look, this had started at the royal wedding, terrible things were said and done, and they've not recovered from it. So there is this sense of the palace trying to take back control, not only of the Sussex situation, but also all of these reports about the acrimony at the heart of the family.
OK, thank you, Camilla.
Well, as the Queen's statement confirms, Harry and Meghan's wish to become financially independent. What does this mean for the royal couple? Sam Rubin's live from LA for us now. Good morning, Sam.
Morning, Sam.
Well, what are the papers saying over there?
Well, the papers are saying an awful lot about the possibility of this MEGXIT. In fact, we'll show you a cover in just a moment. This is really, particularly the summit yesterday, has dominated news coverage here in the States, extraordinarily so. Obviously, there's been a lot of interest in the couple ever since they got together romantically, the wedding and therefore. But you can see here the network news coverage really spending an awful lot of time with this, almost dominating our news coverage to the exclusion of major events. For example, the downing of the airplane in Iran. This got more coverage than that did, which is really something.
So what's this going to look like? I mean, financially for them, coming over there, is this going to be lucrative?
Potentially, it could be extraordinarily lucrative. One thing that happens, and maybe it's based on the size of the countries or our advertising markets, is if you are a big celebrity here, as many from the UK have discovered, David Beckham comes to mind, you can make an awful lot of money here. So there's opportunities for endorsements and deals. One thing that I think might serve as a template is what the Obamas have done, where they have retained, I think, the sort of exclusive nature and yet have signed book deals worth tens of millions of dollars. And then what I would call marquee deals. Theirs is with Netflix, the streaming service, where you set up a production company. In the case of the Obamas, they actually have an Oscar-nominated documentary now. But this happens all the time, where a company like Netflix or Apple wants to be affiliated with a big name, so they will sign a multi-million-dollar production deal, and then nothing really happens. But you get that enormous publicity bump just from signing the deal, and of course, potentially, Harry and Meghan pocket all that money.
Well, also from a personal point of view, she's got the full support of her mother, Doria Ragland.
Indeed, she does. Of course, Doria has been worried about it from the very start. Doria here in Southern California, in Los Angeles. And this discussion, would they move here to join her? And to that end, apparently they've been very adamant about the fact that as long as President Trump remains president of the United States, they much prefer to live in Canada than to live in Southern California. So I think that move to here obviously waits a decision from the American voters in November. But nonetheless, Mom is here much closer to Canada, obviously, than the UK. You know, Camilla made reference to that video involving the Prince and Bob Iger. We have that video. I want to show it to you. This is where he essentially solicits a job for his wife as a voiceover artist. And this video, which is really over a year old, has been getting an awful lot of attention now.
Yes.
What Bob Iger saying there, you saw the words on the screen, you know, she's very good at voiceovers, we'd love to try it. That kind of thing. That's from the Lion King premiere several months ago.
Wow, I hadn't seen that.
Neither had
I. People are talking about Meghan possibly doing a tell-all interview. That Oprah's name's been sort of thrown into the ring there. Is that a possibility?
I think it is absolutely within the realm of possibility. Obviously, the ITV special got an extraordinary amount of attention. But, and this is very typical of American media, we want one that's our own. And Barbara Walters doesn't do these anymore, but the big marquee journalists here, and certainly Oprah's name would be at the top of the list. And this potentially could be also a very, very lucrative circumstance, depending on how they agree to do it. Is it a commercial venture where they split advertising revenue? Is it a streaming venture where, once again, Netflix or Amazon pays for that kind of conversation? You know, that's another thing. The idea that perhaps Meghan could become a mini Oprah of sorts and conduct her own interviews, or the two of them could work together producing documentaries or other features. Again, there's a plethora of potential opportunities here, and what's distinct is people here are willing just to pay for the association as opposed to necessarily any real work.
Thank you
Wow.
very much indeed,
Wow.
Sam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Camilla.